Okay, Headstrong book study, take 567. Guys, real moment here. I am so glad that this is important to me. I'm sharing it with you guys because it's a lot about what we're talking about in the group. Things are hard, right? Things in our lives get hard. Running this book club is something I'm so excited to do. And doing things like this, running Stemnonic, doing the virtual things, doing the videos with 3 kids, with a busy practice is no easy task. And so thank goodness it's important to me because that's what makes me push through all those things. I've literally tried 3 days. It has been interesting. But anyway, my point in mentioning all of that is a lot of the stuff that we're doing in here is we are helping our body physically and mentally be able to push through to the next level. Of course, always while remaining healthy and listening to our body. And at the same time, finding reasons for doing so. So we've talked about having really strong purpose. Understanding the importance of why I think is really huge too. And that's part of why I chose this book for our book study, Headstrong. I absolutely love Dave. I think he's an amazing person. He is someone who did not feel well for a big chunk of his life. He was told he was totally fine, and the cognitive decline, the poor memory, the brain fog, the fuzzy, the fatigue, the man boobs, as he calls them, he was told they were all just a part of the aging process. He did not want to settle for that, and so he took it upon himself to take things to the next level. And that's essentially what he teaches in his podcast. He has multiple books. I love all of his books. I've read, I think, most, if not all of them. And a lot of the strategies and tips that he talks about are things that Jason and I have incorporated into our lives in the last 4 or 5 years. And so what it's allowed us to do, which is another reason I want to bring this to you guys, is we essentially feel, well, we know we are healthier than we were 10 years ago, hands down. We are working more hours. We are on an airplane, more traveling for work, often spending the entire weekend in a hotel or conference center, not even being outside. We are really burning the candle at both ends. However, we're healthier, we feel better. Our quality of sleep has dramatically increased because we focus on it, work on it. And it's really cool because we're literally living this. And so we want to bring this stuff to you guys. So what I want to do, at least for this first part, is I want to focus on part 1, and I'm going to kind of chunk down the major concepts that I want to help you guys understand. And then, of course, happy to definitely create a dialogue and conversation around it. So, Dave shared his story again, just like I did, just like I shared his story. So one of the things that he did that he mentioned in the book is he had a SPECT scan done. And so a SPECT scan is essentially, it looks from the outside like an MRI machine, but it's a functional brain you literally parts of the brain that are not firing the way that they should, that are not doing their job. Whereas an MRI will show mainly like diseased states, pathology, tumors, things like that. A SPECT scan will show you more like, is this part of your brain working? Is this part super inflamed? Things like that. His SPECT scan was awful. And so he went on to, try these strategies on himself. We're going to be talking about between now and the next group is going to be biohacking. It's literally the ability to change our biology from different technologies and ancient healing strategies. So you guys mastered some of the ancient healing strategies around fasting and ketosis, or you're still mastering. That's definitely biohacking. You're literally turning on and off genes. So you're turning off bad genes and you're turning on good genes. You are clearing out toxins in your body. You are clearing out inflammation. You are essentially aging in reverse with some of these things. And so in this book, he's going to talk about a lot more of those that we can bring to the table. I want to expose you to all of them, and you can choose which ones work for you, and you can start to chip away at them. Even if you finish this book study and maybe you add one more thing into your life, I think that's fantastic. And so one of the first concepts I want to focus on is he talks a lot about the mitochondria. I want to be able to talk about the mitochondria in this group. The mitochondria is so important in the way that we feel and function. And so also, if you guys can walk away from this book study with a good understanding, even like a 3rd or 5th grade level understanding is totally fine of what the mitochondria is, then we've done our job as well. So we can think of the mitochondria essentially as a battery. So what happens is the mitochondria is literally in every cell. So if you remember back from science class, we'd all draw that cell or make the model of the cell. The mitochondria was kind of like the bean-shaped piece of the cell. And the job of the mitochondria is to bring take the information that's coming in, the nutrients, even the toxins, things like that, and to turn it into energy. And so when we have a healthy, fully charged battery, we can function at a really high level. Our brain is crystal clear, super efficient, and we have a ton of energy. If our battery is dull, dead, not charging, we will feel that, right? So think of mitochondria as the battery. It's in every cell. It turns our nutrients into energy. In the 7-week program, it stands for adenosine triphosphate. Who cares? Doesn't matter. You guys don't need to know that. But essentially, think of mitochondria makes ATP. ATP is our energy. Okay. There are certain, I'm looking at my notes here so I don't forget anything. There are certain parts of our bodies that are very energy dependent. And so they contain more mitochondria than any other place in our body. 2 of those places that have a ton of mitochondria are our brain and our eyes. So remember that. 2 of the main places affected by the health of our mitochondria are our brain and our eyes. And so clearly the mitochondria are really important. The unfortunate thing is if there's toxins coming in, the mitochondria are going to feel them. They are going to be massively affected by them and impacted by them. Toxins coming in cause sick, weak mitochondria. They don't do their job. And if that's happening a lot and often, essentially we're going to feel that, right? So we're going to feel that in how we function. Something that's really interesting that was in the book, cyanide, the poison cyanide, essentially works by rapidly killing your mitochondria. So we can live days without food, weeks without food, days without water, minutes without oxygen, seconds without mitochondria. So they are probably the most important piece of our body. And it's insane that we don't learn more about them growing up, right? In biology and things like that. So mitochondria is super important. Okay, so the areas of our bodies that contain the most of them, again, are extremely vulnerable to the health of our mitochondria. Something that's really neat about mitochondria, just like we talked about in the 7-week program, is, through certain strategies, we can kill off the bad and strengthen the good. Just like we did with our toxic cells with fasting, we can do the same thing with mitochondria. One thing that's really good for mitochondria is the ability to easily switch between fuel sources. Meaning, if you have carbohydrates coming in as your main fuel source, they can run off those, okay? Or glucose, carbohydrates or glucose. And if you have fat coming in or ketones, they can run off those just fine. The ability to easily switch between one and the other and feel totally fine is what we call fat adaptation. So you guys have all experienced ketosis at this time. Your body can very efficiently run off fat. Ideally, what we want to see the longer you're in this program is that you can run off fat, you can test your ketones and they can be high. You can throw in a weekly feast day, and then the next day when you cut out those carbs, you're totally fine. You don't even think about experiencing keto flu. You don't experience the brain fog. You can go right into ketosis and fasting and be totally fine. That's essentially fat adaptation. That is so good for the mitochondria because it stresses them. The weak ones die off and the strong ones get stronger. And that's what we want. How else can we help our mitochondria? Because this is so important. Healthy fats are so good for the mitochondria. So you guys are doing that. That's excellent. Spending time outdoors. We're going to talk about this a lot as well. Obviously, this is a challenge with where we live at certain times of the year, which we are experiencing right now. I'm going to do a different video on spending time outdoors, the importance of it, and its relation to light. Light is something Dave's going to talk about a lot. There's different kinds of lights that we're supposed to be exposed to for many reasons. Our mitochondria need healthy light. We are getting exposed to a ton of what he calls in the book junk light. Blue light essentially is junk light. We're in front of a screen. So I'm in front of a computer right now, I'm getting blue light. I also have my, whatever these fancy lights are that I turn on when I'm doing a video, that's junk light. I will tell you, if I'm filming a few videos or if I'm in front of the computer for a chunk of time, I feel it. My eyes experience it for sure. This is junk light, and it is part of our reality. Fluorescent lights are junk light. And so what I think is really neat about Dave Asprey's approach is it's not like, don't do these things. It doesn't stress you out. Like, how am I going to change this? How am I going to stop doing this? This is part of my life. It's like, how do you balance it? And so we will talk a lot about red light, infrared light, and UV light. And so part of the reason for getting outside is to get exposure to the UV light and to get exposure to the infrared light. Everything in moderation. However, we are not getting hardly any kind of light. And so we either need to make a point. Sunrise and sunset is the best source of those lights. If you notice, if you watch a sunrise, if you watch a sunset, look at how much red light there is. Those are the optimal times to be exposing yourself to light. Red light is so very important for so many things in our body. I see it every morning. I see the sunrise coming up. I'm like, wow, beautiful red light. Wish I could go out there and expose my skin. It's freezing. It's not going to happen. And so I use a lot of therapeutic red and infrared light. So we'll talk about that in another video. The other thing we can do is decrease inflammation. That's going to be the next video I do after this. So we'll talk on inflammation, but that's big. What's interesting is that our mitochondria, for most people between the ages of 30 and 70, they decline by half. And so what that's telling us is, if we know that our mitochondria play a huge role in how we feel and how we think, and if they decline by half at those ages, when a lot of people start to feel the effects of aging that they just expect to feel, by focusing on our mitochondria before then or during that time, can we essentially build our mitochondria, make more of them, and make the mitochondria that we have so strong that we do not suffer the negative effects of normal aging? Yes, I 100% believe that we can. People like Dave are proving it. And so that is a big goal of mine as well with this book study, is to remind you guys that we do have control. So if you can understand what your mitochondria are, how you help them thrive, what things destroy them and limit that, we can essentially start to slow or even reverse aging. So cool. Last thing on mitochondria, I talked about the majority of them are in the brain and in our eyes, right? So there's a part of the brain called the prefrontal. Your prefrontal cortex is essentially in charge of decision-making, executive function. So if you think of your brain as a team, your prefrontal cortex is the boss or the leader. And so if that part of your brain is not functioning at a high level, the rest of the team doesn't really know what to do. So the mitochondria in that part of the brain are so very important. So you think about, if most of us do not do things on purpose to help our mitochondria, to help them grow and to help them get stronger, and if most of us, if not all of us, lose half of our mitochondria from the age 30 to 70, which also happens to be when most people decline, their cognition declines, memory starts to fade, energy drops, the typical behaviors that you see as we age, well, I'm just getting older. Is that in fact because of the state of the mitochondria? Again, and can we change that? I think it's such a neat question to ask and for you guys to ponder. So I'm going to end this video here. That is the part that summarizes essentially the beginning of the book, the reason I chose the book, and how powerful our mitochondria are. Let me know your questions.